Namaskar. Welcome to Kalinga Literary Festival's Bhava Samvad. So, Bhava Samvad is a platform where we are talking to literary luminaries of this country, artists, politicians, people who are working for society. Basically, it's a dialogue. Basically, it's a discussion on contemporary problems, crisis, creativity. So today we have a very special guest with me, uh, one of India's leading poets, critics, one of the finest literary organizers that India had ever seen. And I can say that a true sense a legend in his own caliber, K Satchidanandan. And the name needs no introduction. He is born in Kerala. He is a Malayali writer. Also, he writes in English. But every Indian language uh, has a special place for K. Satchidanandan. He is a part of every Indian language literature. So he is having friends in uh, every state, in every language, and I think he is the only writer of our time who had written about almost every language poetry, every language literature of this country. And whatever we are looking at Sahitya Academy today, uh, Sahitya Academy is a running on a format that was created by Sachidanandan in 1996 to 2006. That 10 years was the most eventful and powerful time in Sahitya Academy. So I welcome you, Sachida. It's a great
Thank
honor
you.
to
Thank you very much.
have you.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Let
Yeah,
me
I could not
start.
accept earlier invitations to Kalinga Literary Festival, but now at least virtually I can join you. I'm quite happy about it, and thank you, Kedar, and thank you all the organizers.
Thank you, Sajida. It's always an honor to talk to you and to have you amidst us. I also gave you one or two invitations personally to come to Odisha, and that could not happen. So somehow, when finally it happens virtually. So let me start this discussion with a poem. Not a poem. I just want to recite one or two lines from a poem. Some kinds of love. Some kinds of love are like flu. First you sneeze, your body itches all over. You are not outside and inside. It subsides after a week of nightmares. Now you are in forgetful repose. It's a very famous poem by Sachidanandanji. Uh, when we are talking about some kinds of love are like flu in this pandemic time, how you relate this poem? And everyone, this pandemic has make our life completely different. Relationships are completely uh, devastated. Human life is in the most terrible crisis. So in that time, how do you see your existence as a poet, your existence as a creative being during this pandemic time?
Yes, I also share the feeling of loneliness because generally once in a while I do meet people, but not many. Maybe my relatives, or maybe when I go for a walk here on the courtyard of this building, I meet some neighbors. Other than that, I don't meet people. And I miss that a lot. And secondly, as you very well know, I am a compulsive traveler. I have traveled
Right,
across the
right.
world, and this is the time when a lot of literary festivals are taking place. So I am taking part in some of them virtually. Even 1 week back, I took part in the Medellin Literary Festival in Colombia, but that again was a virtual festival. Even though I was there once physically, but this time it was a virtual participation. So I do miss my travels. I do miss my friends, and the living audience, which is a very different ball game altogether, because it is not like talking to shadows. You are talking to real people who react, who love you, who applaud you, or who may contradict you, who may ask you questions. But you miss all that. Even in a virtual festival like this, there's a lot of things that any writer really misses. But I have tried to fill these. If they can be called holidays, yes, these holidays with some meaning by doing two or three things. One is, of course, I have been writing some poems, but that is not something that one can deliberately do. When a poem comes to you, you sit down and write. Well, so I have written quite a few, maybe 6 to 8 poems during these 2 3 months. That is one thing I did. And of course, I did a few articles on demand from some of our well-known publications. But then two major things I did was, one is translating Kabir, because
Okay.
Kabir, I believe, is extremely relevant and significant to a time like this, when there is a lot of hatred going around. I mean, there is communalism, there is rivalry among communities, and this hatred is being deliberately promoted by some forces, as all of us know. And so, at a time like that, I thought the great message of Kabir, which is of religious harmony. One of his poems is called Rama Allah, because he does not make any distinction between Rama and Allah. So I
Raman.
think that kind of message that the Bhakti poets and the Sufi poets gave. You had Salebaga, for example. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you
We
you
have
have in
Salabeg and
all the
Baba
languages.
both.
Yeah, in every language you have these poets. You have Rahim, you have Kabir, you have Chaitanya. I mean, Tukaram, Namadev. You could name them. Basavaya in the south, or Tirumula in the south, or Akka Mahadevi, or Lalleshwari in Kashmir. So you have a lot of poets who were sometimes Shaivites, sometimes Vaishnavites, sometimes Sufis, and sometimes all of them. Like Lalleshwari was both a Sufi and a Shaivite. So we had such a syncretic tradition. And I am extremely worried about the loss of that syncretic tradition, where because India as an idea is not anyone's monopoly. It is the creation of so many languages, communities, religions, cultures. All kinds of things have come together to create what is called India. So we have elements of Persian architecture in our architecture. We have the Mughal miniatures. We have the Taj Mahal, and then we have the great Christian missionaries who did a lot for our languages. Our own in Malayalam, our own first dictionary was created by a German missionary called Hermann Gundert. Our first grammar book was written by someone called Father Arnos, again a Christian priest. And our prose in many languages, like ours, prose really began with the translations of the Bible. And so, and of course, we have the other tradition, the tradition which was always here, the Bhakti tradition, the Sufi tradition, the Carnatic music and the Hindustani music, and various kinds of dance from Odissi and Manipuri and Bharatanatyam and Mohiniyattam, and quite a lot of kinds of dances. All these together make my India. It is not as if one religion alone made this India, or one community made it, or one language, or people from one particular region made this India. No, it is made by the contribution from so many communities and languages across the country, including some parts of India which were not in it. I mean, which later became different countries. We should include them also when we speak of India in a larger sense. All of them have contributed. I mean, present day Pakistan, the present day Bangladesh, because they were also parts of India, and so some of our great institutions are in the present day Pakistan, in the present day Bangladesh. So all these, the entire Indian subcontinent has created a culture which is integrated, which is syncretic, which is not a standardized, uniform, monolithic culture, but a culture of diversity, culture of infinite variety. And that is the strength of India. And that was why I thought I would choose to translate Kabir. As you very well know, I have written a lot of poems on Bhakti and Sufi poets, about 14 poems on various Bhakti poets and Sufi poets of India. And now I thought it is time to bring some of them into my language. So I began with Kabir. Now I am doing the Vachana, the Kannada Bhakti poets like Basavanna and Akka Mahadevi and other people. I finished a whole book actually. Many of Kabir's poems, Kabir's some bijaks, some padas, some dohas, some ulat bazis, various kinds of forms that Kabir used, and about 100 page, more than 100 pages actually. A book is coming out in a week or two. My translations of Kabir. That is one thing I did during this period. It is I told them during the lockdown actually, and then
that's
I also decided to bring out an anthology of poems written during this period around the pandemic. It does not
okay.
mean all these poems are about the virus or about the disease. It could be about the loneliness you feel. It could be about the lack of society and community that hurts you. It could be about the revival of nature in the absence of man, because you hear birds you have never heard now. You see clear skies. So sometimes because there is no human intervention, nature has revived itself. So it could be about that. So it could be about any aspect, any dimension of this experience. So I wrote to many poets, and then we gave it some kind of a publicity. So we have 112 poets from 6 continents who come together in this collection, which is being brought out by Penguin Random House, and that is now just about to go to press. It is about 250 poems by 112 poets from across the world. It's in English. That was another thing I did, along with Nishi Chawla, who is a poet living in the US, because she also was thinking of the same kind of a book. Then I said, why don't we do it together? And so we did that together. So these are two major things I did besides my own writing, my writing, reading, and all these things, which anyway have always been going on. And of course, my own writing has been affected in many ways by this. What I will do is I'll just give you one or two samples of the kind of poems I wrote. And one thing that impacted me very painfully was the migrants, the situation of the migrant workers. Because I was witness to that in Delhi. Many of them did not even get a train to travel. Many of them died on the way, walking hundreds of kilometers to their home, and they suffered because they were daily wagers and they had nothing. They had no earning, and they were starving. Their children were starving. So I wrote 3 poems actually on the same issue. I will read just one of them as a sample. It is called The
Please, please.
Train. It is about a worker who could not get into a train, who wanted to go home, but who could not get a train. And then he imagines himself going in that train. The train.
Okay.
It is dedicated to the migrant workers stranded in Delhi during the lockdown. That train is going to my village, but I am not in it. Its rails are inside me. Its wheels are on my chest, and its whistle is my scream. I won't be there when it comes back to take me, but my breath will travel seated on its roof, guarding my corpse. As the train stops at my village, my breath will enter my body and ride my waiting bicycle along the old familiar lanes. My children will come running as they hear its bell. Abu is here, Abu is here. In which language can I tell them? It is my dead body that has arrived, of heaven or hell. I am somewhere in between. Let the well talk or the pond. If water refuses to speak, let my breath enter a crow on the drumstick tree on my courtyard and tell them the truth. So this is one of
Okay.
the many poems I
Wonderful,
wrote during
wonderful.
that
It's
period. There
very.
are many, but of course you can ask me other questions. We
Yeah,
can
yeah,
move
yeah.
on.
I just, when we're talking about the idea of India, okay, we always love to talk about the idea India, and we are committed to the idea of India, which is based on uh, multifold diversities. But when we are talking about this diversity nowadays, there is another idea of India which is being propagated and promoted by the ruling class. The India of unipolarity, the India of one language, one culture, one religion. And if you oppose to that idea, immediately you are branded with a name. So there is a tradition of name calling, Tukde Tukde gang or Awad Wapsi gang. So you are very much part of that award Wapsi gang, and me too. So we all are part of that name calling. Actually, everybody is an anti-national now. So how do you look at this shift? Actually, this shift is not only in politics. The shift is in literature. Earlier literature, we have the hardly you can find a writer who was supporting this kind of idea. But nowadays we can see some of writers are also joining this idea. Journalism, it's completely a victim of this idea. And human suffering is losing its value. Nobody is looking at human suffering. So you wrote a poem on the distress of migrant laborers. Every one of us written about that. But what's the role of media? What's the role of judiciary? What's the role of politics? No, poetry or literature cannot do the kind of impact they can do. But how do you see that? This shift of idea of India and this dangerous trend of uniformity, the so-called one India based on one uh, idea, one political idea. How do you see that, and how to fight that actually?
Yeah, indeed. I have no doubt that there is a great ideological battle going on between that monolithic idea of India, where there is the hegemony of one religion, one kind of culture, one even one language to a
Yes,
great extent. But all of us have grown up in another kind of India. See, I was born just before India became an independent country. Then I grew up during the time of Jawaharlal Nehru as a prime minister. And from that time onwards, we have inherited an idea of India, as I earlier said, that is an integrated idea. It has so many elements, and all the elements have their own individuality. Even when we speak of the idea of India, it is not a unitary, uniform, monolithic idea at all. We are speaking about a process. Actually, I have always believed that like Indian literature, India is also a process. It is being slowly made because every day new languages are joining, new cultures are joining, new modes of thinking are joining it, and so India is something that is being made. It will be even now, but striking a severe blow to this kind of idea of India. Now you have this idea of a Hindu India or a Hindi India or a or an India which excludes so many religions and cultures which are an essential and integral part of real India. So there is the real India, which is rich, abundant, diverse, beautiful, colorful, and there is another India which has no opposition, no criticism, no free thinking, which is completely against the idea of India that Tagore, for example, had, the kind of dream he had about India, where but you find that streams of thought are drying up, and you are not allowed even to write what you want to write or to say what you say, because the moment you say something critical about the ruling government or the ruling ideology, you will be abused, you will be attacked, and you may be killed. It was just a day back that Gauri Lankesh was killed.
yeah,
5th of
yeah, yeah.
September. And then all about Pansare and Thaborkar and Kalburgi and all those victims and people who were silenced like Perumal Murugan, quite a few writers who were not allowed to publish books. So we are passing through a very strange, very ironic, extremely painful time. Sometimes I feel it's also a funny time because you cannot believe the kind of things that are happening. Somebody is beaten up because he has taken a particular kind of food which he has been taking for long, and he is beaten up by somebody who may be coming from a completely company which makes a lot of money exporting the same kind of food. So you hear very strange things. Suddenly, myth becomes history, and history becomes myth. Lies become truth, and truth becomes lies. Nehru's image is completely erased from history. Nobody wants to hear about Nehru. I mean, those who, the present rulers, they don't want to hear about Nehru. They don't want to hear about secularism. They want to remove the words like secular and socialist, even the constitution. They have no respect for the constitution and the fundamental freedoms and values that the constitution gives every Indian citizen. And they create new rules. First they use rules which are already there, like UAPA and all that, without any foundation and basis. They create cases against all those who disagree with them, and they have created a whole new dictionary, as you said, a whole lexicon of words like Tokune gang or urban Excel or terrorist or traitor, all kinds of words which can be applied to anybody anytime. And he or she can be arrested, because it was even during the last 10 or 15 days, I found a lot of my friends being charged. They were like Apurvanand is an old friend of mine. So he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
charged with a case. He had instigated the Delhi riots, while actually he is a peace worker. Harshmandar is a worker for peace, and they just wrote about the riots, and they were very critical of what happened there, and so they became suddenly the conspirators. So such things are happening almost every day in the country. So there is a deliberate promotion of an exclusivist idea of India, where you keep out Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, Parsi religion, all of them, and they say India is Hindu. Secondly, they say India is Aryan, and the word Aryan, is a kind of very controversial term. Robina Thapar has
Yes,
written there is nothing like Aryan. There are Aryan languages, but there is no race called Aryan. And all the recent researchers have shown that all of them have come from outside and different. All of us actually, except the original African natives who happen to be in India. The so-called Aryans, the so-called Dravidians, all of them have come to India at different points of time. Some coming from the Mediterranean, some coming from Central Asia, like Iran. The so-called Aryans come from Central Asia. So all of us have come from different places, and okay, we have merged with this soil, this culture. We drink this water, we breathe this air, and thus we have in some way become Indians. Not that India belongs to a particular race or a particular religion. And as I said, all these religions and cultures have contributed to India. So we should stick to that idea of India, where we respect every language. By language, I don't mean the languages in the eighth schedule of the constitution. I have always opposed that idea, because even there is a famous saying that a dialect can become a language if it has a political party and an army. So there are no. So I would say that Odia is a language. If Odia is a language, Sambalpuri is also a language, and so are so many other dialects. For example, the language Hindi has been created artificially almost, because there are so many languages which are subsumed by the term Hindi, because there is Bhojpuri, there is Bundelkhandi, there is Chhattisgarhi, and there is Rajasthani, and many people think that all these are Hindi, and that is how why Hindi has become the major language of India. So, and this is true about other languages or tribal languages, that Adi or Ao or Mundari or Gondi or Garo. I mean, you can name them. There are hundreds of tribal languages. There are more than 600 languages in India, and all of them are equally important. And all of them have their own literatures, their folk literature, or their written literature. And so we cannot exclude any single language, any single community, any single culture from our idea of India. And that is the major battle, or in the cultural field. I am not entering politics, because that is another. That will lead us to another long discussion. I have been speaking about it publicly, writing about it all through my life, and we are also running a quarterly called Guftagu and we have a website called Indian Cultural Forum, where we discuss the everyday happenings going on in India right from 2014. So I am not entering the political discussion, but we all know what is happening, how freedom of thought is suppressed, because even thinking has become a crime. Earlier, you had to express yourself at least, but now you need not express it. Somebody can say in his brain, he's carrying Mao Zedong's thoughts, and so he can be arrested and put in jail and called a traitor. So even those who are not activists, who just think or write, or who just have ideas, even they become enemies of the nation. And so we are passing through such a terrible phase, which is very close to the idea that Hitler had about Germany or Mussolini had about Italy. We are passing through a fascist phase of Indian politics, and that is where all of us need to be very alert. As you said, literature and poetry alone cannot solve all these issues, but we can make people aware through our writing. We can make them aware that this is their India too. It is not the India of a few people who claim to be, the dominant people belonging to the hegemonic religion, or speaking a particular language, or claiming that they belong to a particular race, when there is no pure race in India. All the races are mixed, actually. We should be able to contradict these and create another kind of India. So, because imagination has a lot of role to play in politics, in science, in religion, everywhere. Imagination is very important. Political imagination is also as important as poetic imagination. And it is the lack of imagination that leads to these very, very narrow, very rigid, and very insular ideas of the nation. So we should openly fight it, fearlessly fight it, and say that
when
we live in a various and diverse India.
when we are talking all this, I remember one of your very small but beautiful poem called Sakuntalam. In Sakuntalam, you have the three, whereas the mother's thinking, the father's thinking, and the son's thinking. There's three layer, and all three, Dushyanta, Shakuntala, and Bharata, all three have become three metaphors of time actually. So everybody is suffering that same, but this branding and our apathy to human tragedy, that earlier, okay, you be a right wing or left wing, you be a communist or socialist, be a Congress or RSS, at least we had a heart, that we are human actually. We have a thinking for suffering. But we have seen during this pandemic that lakhs of people, millions of people are walking on the road, and hardly you can find a sympathetic political voice. Okay, we have heard a lot of poetry, we have heard so many concerned voice from thinking people, but we did not hear a good, powerful, impressive voice from the ruling class who can really make their life better. Lakhs of people are walking on the road, and everybody is silent, everybody is celebrating their own loneliness. And we are talking about the slogan, stay home, safe home, stay home. Okay, what kind of society you are making actually? We are becoming completely not bothered about what is happening to the man who is walking on the street. So at that time, what a poet can really do actually. Now, and I can add another question to it, that when there are many troubles and crises, human crisis, we have seen that there are great poems, there are great literature coming out of that troubled time. Do you think that we are entering into that kind of phase? We are into that kind of troubled time in India?
Indeed, we are passing through a troubled time, troubled in many ways, because there are viruses attacking our physical body and also our political body. And in that sense, we are passing through a very traumatic kind of time. And it is true that, bubonic plague and earlier epidemics had given rise to great works of art. the most recent example is Albert Camus' Plague. And it is said that Shakespeare wrote some of his most well-known plays like King Lear during the epidemic. So we are also in some sense passing through a similar kind of stage when our imagination is wounded. We are constantly being challenged, not only by the COVID virus, but by the situation that surrounds us, the situation of the poor workers and the people who have lost their livelihood. We are constantly disturbed by the condition in which a lot of people live even after so many years of independence. We are worried about the growth of authoritarian governments, not only in India but across the world. You have Bolsonaro, you have Putin, you have Trump, you have so many. You have Erdogan. So name them, and you find them everywhere. The same person in different names ruling across the world. So we are passing through an extremely difficult and sad and reactionary phase of history, a regressive phase of history. And the best poetry, the best literature that should come out of this period, I believe, is the literature of resistance, of some kind of resistance. I do not mean loud slogans, but you could articulate your resistance in a very subtle, beautiful, and nuanced ways. And that is perhaps the kind of literature that we need today. A literature of resistance, which you may not be committed to a party. You need not be a member of a political party. You need not even subscribe to a particular political ideology to do this. If you love democracy, if you love freedom, if you love humanity, well, that's enough. That is enough for a poet to sustain a poet throughout his or her life, because that will give the poet the reason to sympathize, to empathize with all those who suffer, across the world, including, of course, his or her own country. And this empathy should be the basis of any kind of literature, and from that should come this kind of a resistance, which will have essentially what I call a subaltern content, because the resistance should come from the people who are suffering. Could be workers, could be peasants, could be Dalits, could be women, could be transgender or LGBT people, could be the minority people who belong to various kinds of minorities. So these are the people from whom the resistance should actually come. So the poets, a majority of whom belong to the middle class, there have a kind of intermediary role to play by awakening their consciousness, by telling them that you are being attacked, that you are not losing your livelihood, you are being robbed of your livelihood. You are not starving, but you are made to starve. You are made to kill yourself. You are led to such a situation, and it is not nature which is doing it, but it is man, it is capital, it is exploitation that is doing this. So we need to tell these. Not we can tell these through speeches directly, but through poetry also we can make people aware of what they are and what they should have been and what unfortunately they have become. So to show these, the task of the poet is the task of a witness. A poet is a witness. Poet is also somebody who remembers. Czesław Miłosz, the Polish poet, says, "Oh, you who rejoices at the suffering of a simple man, don't think that you will not be found. No, the poet remembers." And if one poet dies, another poet will come in his or her place and speak the truth. So the commitment to truth is the fundamental thing that a poet should have, from which comes pity, and all other kinds of human values that literature always cherishes. So to have the courage to tell the truth, to have the language to communicate the truth. These are, I think, the extremely important challenges that poets and writers of all kinds really face today. And if we can do that, we will definitely create a great literature, a literature trauma like Holocaust. During the when the Jews were killed in the concentration camps. A thinker like Theodore Adorno said, poetry is impossible after Auschwitz. I mean, after such inhuman things, you cannot write poetry. But poets happened. Poets came from the same concentration camps. Poets like Porcelain, Abba Kovner, Nelly Sals. Many poets came from the concentration camps. Either they were in the concentration camps or their parents had died in the concentration camps, and they began to write about the great suffering that their families and their country passed through during that time. So I always say what Adorno meant was not that you cannot write poetry. What he meant was you will have to write another kind of poetry. It is not the poetry about the nightingale and the bulbul alone. You will have also to write about poison gas. You will have to write about the concentration camp. You will have to write about the little shoes of the children who were choked to death in the gas chambers of Auschwitz or other, say, Buchenwald and other concentration camps. So for that we may need to invent a new language sometimes. Sometimes we have to torture language. Recently I read an essay by Zizek, the great Slovenian thinker. It's called the Poetic Torture House of Language, where he says that sometimes poets cannot tell the truth. Even from Germany, many poets ran away, saying that we cannot write anymore in this language because this language is used to spread the lies. Under Goebbels and other people, lies were being propagated across the country as it is being done now. And so many poets said, we want to leave this country before our language, the marrow of our language is filled with untruth. So when language becomes untruth, like because Heidegger had said, language is the house of being, and Zizek asks, suppose that house is occupied by untruth, what do we do? Then you may have to break that house. You may have to torture language and make it tell the truth. So because when language goes on telling untruth, you will have to make it tell the truth, and there you may have to use language in very new, very unexpected ways. Very different from the ways in which language had been used earlier. That is what a poet like Porcelain did, or Cesar Vallejo did in Peru, and in many countries, many poets did the same kind of thing. So they changed the idiom of poetry so that they could make poetry tell the truth. I think we are passing through a time like that when we will have to create our own new idioms in order to create a new kind of poetry that has the courage to tell the truth and that carries the conviction and the beauty of truth.
That's a very, very, very sensible and it's a very revealing point that when you are talking about torturing language or deconstructing the language, because well, the language is always vulnerable because it is used by everyone. It used by the rulers. It used by the tyrants. It used by the media, the lynching media nowadays. We can see that. So, sorry. So in that way, uh, it's not only language. So you are a little bit earlier, you were talking about Nehru, and when we are talking about Nehru, you can see the institutions in a democratic process. We built up many institutions, and Sahitya Academy was one among them, who was the protector and propagator of our cultural heritage, our diversified cultural heritage of this country. How do you see literary institutions? Because we could not make many great institutions. We had one or two literary institutions in this country. Do you see the institutions like language? As you told that we must nurture the language. How do you see the institutions? Because you were Sahitya Academy secretary for a decade, and I always believe that the Sahitya Academy, that format that you created for academy, till now it is running on that format. Do you see academy's future? How will it be there as an institution of Indian literature, Indian diversity, Indian cultural ethos, or it will also go into the hand of those people who are trying to capture it for their propaganda?
In fact, not only the Sahitya Academy, most of the institutions have already gone into their hands and they have become ideological propaganda machines. ICHR, for example, Indian Council for Historical Research, Indian Council for Social Research and Scientific Research, and other institutions like Nehru Museum or National Book Trust. Many of these institutions, most of which were founded by Jawaharlal Nehru, actually, have become the ideological instruments of the dominant and ruling party and the ruling class. Sahitya Academy so far has not completely gone into their hands because of the kind of constitution that Nehru made, which is a little difficult to manipulate. Unless, of course, one thing can be done: they can dismiss. They can stop elections, as it has been done in Lalit Kala Academy. As you know, there has been no election in Lalit Kala Academy for some time, so it is being directly ruled by somebody appointed by the government. That is something they can do, a complete takeover. Otherwise, it is very hard because the members come from universities, from literary institutions, from the different regional academies, and there are 8 eminent writers chosen from different languages of India. So it is very difficult to create a general council that will have a uniform opinion. They can bring in some of their representatives from the states where they rule, and if they happen to rule more states, it is possible that they become the majority also. Then a lot of their agenda can be implemented in the Sahitya Academy. I always fear that, but I also hope that it doesn't really happen. At least there are quite a few states where at least that they don't have enough intellectuals and writers with them to go into the academy, and so maybe the academy will be saved. Maybe it will not be. It depends on what kind of council is going to be formed in the next general elections to the academy. But the academy's real function, as we already know, is to represent this diversity, the variety of languages and cultures, and the various forms of imagination of India, from the old times to the present times, and to initiate a dialogue among all these streams of thought and language and literature and ideas. Not to unify them. Academy was never meant to. Nehru also would never say they should be unified, but there should be a conversation going on. Always a conversation between Odia and Malayalam, between Bengali and Hindi, between Avo and Mundari. So that conversation should go on, and that is the function of the academy. Academy should not interfere beyond that. Bring people together. Let them talk. Let them exchange ideas. Let them read their works to one another. Let them be given platforms for free expression. That is the original idea of the academy, and that, I think, should not be compromised. If that also is compromised, even the last institution will have gone from the hands of free thinking people. And so we have to be extremely careful as writers to protect the autonomy of an institution like the Sahitya Academy, and of course fight for the return of autonomy, the return of the other institutions to autonomy. So we need to fight for the independence of institutions, and of course the freedom of individuals in a situation like this, where independent voices are always suppressed, and even people are killed because they love truth and they have spoken the truth.
Okay, so we discussed a lot. So now it's a poetry time. I want to listen more poems from you, because at least I want to. Many of my Odia friends, they must listen one if you have that poem, Gandhian
Yeah,
poetry. If it is with
yeah,
you, because that's the signature poem of K Satchidanandan ji.
yeah.
Without Gandhian poem. So okay, you can recite one or two poems
Let me see.
now.
Yeah, because now I am in Kerala. I don't have all my books with me. I have only one or two books, but I'll read some of those, some of the more recent poems.
Please,
Since you
please, please.
spoke of Gandhi, after that I have written quite a few poems on Gandhi, and Gandhi is becoming more and more relevant, as you very well know, in a time like this. So I will read a poem where Gandhi comes in. It is not, but it was Gandhi who inspired this poem, because Gandhi was a fast walker. He walked very fast, And this poem is called Walk, Walk. So it is inspired deeply by that fast walking Gandhi, like the Dandi March, where he was walking more than better than all the young people who took part in that. So I'll read. I'll begin with that and then go to a few other poems. It's called Walk, 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 Walk together. Walk with the questions yet to find an answer. Walk with a song without a roof. Walk with the picture whose river has vanished. Walk with the last leaf of the felled tree. Walk with the consonants of the proscribed poem. Walk with the blood from the stab wound. Walk, walk along the shade between the hair and the grass, through the fire, between the word and its meaning, with walk in red with the sun's dreams, walk in black with the moon's solitude, walk against the wind's direction, walk across the water's flow, walk, walk from death to life with a palette of colors. You are the sculptor, and you the sculpture. Stop and you will fall. Walk without a pause, like the Buddha leaving the palace, like Jesus climbing the Calvary, like Gandhi marching to Dandi. Walk, walk, walk on, never looking back. Walk, walk, walk. That is the
Yeah,
poem.
we have to walk. Yeah, great, great. It's extremely great poem actually. Thank you very much. So, another poem we want to recite. You know,
Uh,
when you
yeah,
start
I have
reciting
quite
your poem,
quite a few. Yeah. I'll read a short poem. I have a lot of poem on women and on the theme of women and of girls. I'll read one of them um, called A Girl of 13. The Girl of 13, 1 3. The girl of 13 is not the boy of 13. She has died drowning in nightmares until she forgot her butterflies. She has passed through caverns of darkness, leaving the lullabies behind. The girl of 13 is 43. She knows a bad touch from a good one. She knows it is not wrong to tell a lie in order to survive. She knows how to fight a war with teeth and with songs. You see only the rose on her body, but it is full of thorns. The girl of 13 can fly. She doesn't want to leave the sun and the sun and books just for men. Her swing circles the moon and moves from melancholy to madness. She doesn't dream of the prince as you seem to think. The girl of 13 has her feet in the netherworld, even as she touches the rainbow. One day, sword in her hand, she will come riding a white horse. Listening to the hooves echo in the clouds, you will know the 10th avatar the Puranas prophesy is a woman. That's the poem called
great.
Girl.
What a poem actually. So now coming to the last leg of our discussion, I want to know from you because you know you are the only significant Indian writer who is a very regular visitor to Odisha, and you have many personal friends in Odia literature, starting from Ramakant, Sitakant to up to our generation. Actually, you know many writers personally very closely. You have published many of them. How do you see Odia literature? You know, you are a Malayali writer, you are an English writer, but how do you see English writer, particularly the younger bunch of writers to whom you have published actually with love and with all respect? That's why we are always thankful to you that you have published all of us. So, how do you see the contemporary Odia poetry and literature from your side? Actually?
Yeah, in fact, I even now I keep reading, young writers, because I consider myself a young writer. I am
Yeah,
only
always,
74,
always.
and I think because I always look at myself as a beginner, because when I am writing a new poem, I have to articulate an experience which I have never articulated before. So for me, I am a beginner. I am writing a fresh poem, a new poem. I have to find a new language. I have to invent new imagery. I have to create new metaphors. And so I look at all the young poets, struggling poets in Indian languages and in other languages also as poets who are my own contemporaries. I never look down on them, or I never try to say advise them or to patronize them. I do encourage them, but not visibly. I don't tell them I am encouraging you, I am your patron, I am your model. I never say that. I have never said that in all my life. But I do them. I publish them. For example, young Malayalam poets. I have translated at least 30 young Malayalam poets. I'm now thinking of an anthology of younger poets. Young poets means including poets who are just 18 or 17, including them. I have translated quite a few of them into English, and many of them were published in Indian literature. Now I'm thinking of a collection of those poets, and I have translated even Oriya poet. Recently 10 poems by Pravasini Mahakut. I translated from Hindi versions because I cannot follow Oriya exactly. So I translated her poem from the Hindi versions, and I know not only her generation and your generation, but even many yeah, younger poets who are coming up in Odia. And I think Odia has a great tradition of literature. Right from the days of Sarala Das or Chaitanya, you have a long tradition of great poetry, of a secular poetry and also spiritual poetry. Well, these are all parts of the great tradition of our poetry, and you have also very major poets like Siddhakant Mahapatra or Ramakant, and there are other poets. You have J.P. Das, you have Harprasad Das, and then we come to your generation, Pravasi's generation, and like the I mean, quite a lot of. I don't want to name all of them because somebody will be hurt if I don't say their names. But I'm not naming all of them. I know a lot of poets who are writing well and who are trying to create a new kind of poetry. So I think because of the coming on the social media, poets are now more free to write. Because they can write without the intervention of an editor. They don't need an editor. They don't need a publication. They can launch a blog. They can write on the Facebook or on other kinds of social media. That gives them a lot of freedom. But I also see a danger there. The danger is that they seldom get the kind of criticism that they should get at that point of time. Because when you begin to write, you are not only looking for people who will praise you and applaud you, you are also looking for people who will criticize you, who will say, no, that word does not look proper. This line is not very necessary here. That metaphor is a mixed metaphor. That image is very obscure. So you need people to tell you that also. That is what we lack in the social media. That is my feeling. Because people come there, it is generally your friends. They come and say you are Shakespeare, you are a Shelley, you are, and they like you. And if you get 1,000 likes, you think you are a major international poet. But so it is all right to use the social media. I am not against it. Even I use social media very often. But you should also be able to take criticism. That also makes you strong, because all of us grew strong because when we were writing a new kind of poetry in the 1960s and early 70s, many critics were very critical about us. Oh, you have given up meter, you have given up rhythm, you are writing in a new kind of language, people won't understand your image, your metaphor. So but gradually we became the mainstream of Malayalam poetry. So but then we needed that criticism at that point of time, so that we would also look into our poetry once again. Is he right? Is she right? Have I gone wrong somewhere? Is this line difficult? Or are these lines very necessary? Then suppose I strike them off, will the poem be still complete? Is this metaphor proper in the particular context? So many thoughts like that were given to us by other people. Of course, we also are critics and we look at our own poems critically. That is very necessary. But other than that, we also need our readers and critics to tell us what is wrong. We may accept it, we may not accept it. That depends on our own imagination and our freedom and what we want to express. But then we need criticism also, along with praise and appreciation. And that is what I think is lacking in the social media. Mostly you find only people coming and praising you and saying this is a very great poem. And if you fall for that, you are lost forever. So you don't believe all the praise you get on the social media. This is the only warning I want to give the young poets. Don't believe that all of them really think you are great because they love you. They say you are great, but you be critical, turn inward, look at what you have written, look at what others have written, read other poets, important and major poets in India and abroad that you get through various kinds of translations, and observe yourself. Observe because poetry is a conversation with oneself, with others, with nature, and with the whole universe. And so you need to observe all these in order to become a proper poet. Observe nature, listen to the rhythms of the rain as it falls on the rock, on the roof, on the floor, on the leaf. Listen to the whole orchestra of the rain during a rainy season. I have a poem called Synonyms of the Rain, where I speak about orchestra of the rain. And so observe nature, observe other human beings, and observe the stars and the sky and the entire nature and the universe, and also observe yourself. Within you, look within you and look outside you, and it is through this kind of a continuous observation that you can become a poet. And also train your voice, train your language, keep on writing and revising and revising and revising until you feel you have reached an end and this is all I can do. There comes a point when it can still be improved by somebody else, but there comes a point where you say, well, I cannot do anything beyond that. At least up to that, you should be ready to go. So revise the poem, because that is something that does not often happen with many young poets, even in my language, because they just write as it comes to them and they just publish it on the blog or on the social media. Don't do that. Revise the poem. And another thing that has helped me is translating poetry. Throughout my life, even now, I keep translating poetry. So I have 2,500 pages of poetry translated from across the world. And that has helped me understand poetry, the art of poetry better. It is like a painter, an apprentice to a painter, looking at a master painter working on a canvas. The way the finger moves,
Right.
the way the lines are made, the way the colors are mixed. So translation is a kind of intimate reading. There you find how the poet's imagination works and how meaning is created, how words are put together, how metaphors and images are created. So you need to read poetry, not only read poetry, also relate to other art. That has also helped me. Watch films, go to theater, listen to good music, see dance programs, all kinds of art. Be connected with all the other arts. They will also enrich your poetry. You may not write poems on all these things. I have written poems also on paintings and other music and other things. I have a poem on Himsan Joshi. I have a poem on Margandhar, quite a few others. But then, even if you don't write about them, that will help you to understand how imagination works in different kinds of art, and that will ultimately help you as a poet, even if in indirect ways. So this is my own. I am not advising anybody, but I am speaking about my own experience and my own growing up as a poet, and I think perhaps there are some lessons to be learned in all these. So this will be my request to younger poets. So please think of improve yourself, work on your language skills, work on your imagination, observe things, translate, read, listen, see, watch, and that is how you grow. And you need, as I said, you need criticism. Don't be angry with your critics, but try to understand whether there is something right in what they say. They may be wrong. You can dismiss them if they are wrong, but there may be something useful to you also in what they say. Listen to that. Even that really helps you as a growing writer. This is what I generally tell younger writers,
So
including myself.
it's a kind of, I remember Rilke's letter to young poets actually. So it like it's a very valuable suggestions actually. Last, I have a last question for you. I'm actually very curious to know that I did not know that you had a science background. You did your graduation in biology. Then coming from biology, how you shifted to English literature, then become a professor of English and a major poet in Malayalam and English. So how this shift happens actually? That from biology to poetry. So it's a very peculiar and
In fact, I
I'm very
had
curious.
yeah, I had a genuine interest in biology actually. So I studied zoology and botany, and along with that, some chemistry and physics and all that for my degree. Because at that point of time, I was thinking mainly of a livelihood. Because I don't come from a very rich family. I come from a lower middle class kind of family. I wanted a job, and people said you have to learn science so that you will get some better employment. And that was one reason. Another was a genuine interest, especially in forms of life. So I was interested in biology, particularly in genetics and other branches of biology. So I took up biology. But by the time I finished my graduation, I had already begun to take a very serious interest in literature. I was interested in literature even in the school. I had begun writing poetry and all that. But now that interest became very serious. And then I thought I should formally study some literature. So then, mainly Hindi, English, and Malayalam were the available courses in Kerala. So I thought Malayalam I can learn myself. I have already read a lot of Malayalam literature and I can read more. I can train myself in the language. So I thought I would learn English, because not only to learn English, British or American writers, but also to read European writers through English translation. And so I took up English, and that was the time when I began to take a very serious interest in literature. I took my writing seriously. I took my reading seriously. I began to read a lot of not only old poets like Shakespeare, on whom I spent a whole vacation, but also old poets like Homer and other people, but also modern poets, right from Yeats and Hopkins and Eliot to Auden and Spender, and the poets who came much later. And at the time when the Penguin Modern Poets series was coming out, the Pelican European Poets was coming out, I was reading all of them. And all these helped me. And later, the reading of a lot of Latin American and African poetry also helped mold my particular sensibility. And my teaching of English also helped, because for teaching you have to read, you have to read a lot, and you have to prepare. And I was also teaching mainly poetry, and that again took me to other poets, and also the very art of communication, because you are communicating with students, which is again a major art, which will in some way it helps. It may harm you, but it can also help you, because you are learning the art of communication through in a classroom. So that is how I moved. But I don't think I wasted those years which I spent on science. No, because when it comes to rational thinking, because as you know, I write not only poetry, I write essays. I have 18 collections of my essays, literary criticism, and also essays on society, religion, education, spirituality, various kinds of subjects. And when I come to write prose, that science background helps me, because it helps me think rationally. Because in poetry, it is imagination that works, not reason. There may be some reason working there, but it's mainly imagination and instinct. It is another way of thinking, or even if there is a reason, it is a different kind of reason. But in prose, your reason works, and that science education helped train my rational thinking, and that comes into play when I begin to write an essay, for example, to write it systematically, dividing paragraphs, writing, expounding ideas, communicating them very well, even creating terms for new concepts when necessary. So that education stayed with me. That's why I said I never feel I wasted the years studying science. No, it is still with me, and even that interest in science, I still read. Not only science fiction, but real science, especially genetic science and all that, which has now become very important, because like we spoke about ions and all that. All the recent discoveries in Indian history, they have a lot to do with genetics. genetics has come into history in a very big way. Ethnology, ethnic studies, genetics, historiography, linguistics, all these have come into history, and that way, science and a kind of training of the intellect that it gave me, that has really helped me a lot.
Thank you very much, K. Satchidanandan ji. I know it's so wonderful to talk to you, and it's a whole range, talking about the idea of India, the aesthetic of suffering, then touch the language, poetry, science, rationality. And so I think it's a very useful conversation, and I'm really delighted to listen some of your poems, and it's a great opportunity and honor to talk to you once again. We had so many good times in so many good festivals, and I hope to see you soon in some festival again. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation, and I express my gratitude on behalf of Kalinga Literary Festival for bringing you to this platform. And I really earnestly I wish to see you in Odisha in days to come. Thank you very much once again, and thank you very
Thank
much,
you, Kedar.
Team Kalinga Literature Festival, Sitansu, Rasmi, and the group, the bosses. So it's a wonderful platform that you have created. At least we are getting opportunity to have dialogues with doyens like Sachidanandanji. Thank you very much once again, and thank you very much our viewers for watching us, for following us, and sharing our thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kedar, and thank you, the organizers and my audience. Thank you so much.